The courtroom was unusually silent when the old man entered. Elias Ward walked slowly, each step measured, as though the floor itself demanded permission to bear his weight. His coat was frayed at the cuffs, its color long surrendered to years of rain and pavement dust. His boots were mismatched. His hands trembled, not with fear, but with age or memory. Bystanders, who had moments earlier been casually scrolling through their phones, lifted their heads. A faint ripple of whispers traveled through the gallery. "Is he homeless? Looks like he slept outside last night. Why's someone like that even in court?" Judge Caprio's eyes followed the murmurs before settling on Elias. For a brief moment, his expression softened, then returned to its calm judicial neutrality. Across the room, Veronica Hale wrinkled her nose as if a foul odor had entered with him. She pulled her designer shawl closer around her shoulders and leaned toward her attorney with a smirk of disdain. "Unbelievable," she muttered under her breath, loud enough for nearby spectators to hear. "This is the man who scratched my car?" Her attorney whispered something cautionary, but Veronica didn't care. Her diamond earrings glittered as she tilted her chin upward, examining Elias the way one might examine a problem rather than a person. A court officer approached Elias to guide him toward the defendant's table. Elias nodded respectfully, his posture humble but not broken. When he finally reached the table, he sat down slowly, his hands folding in his lap with deliberate steadiness. Judge Caprio cleared his throat. Case number 14-883. Veronica Hale versus Elias Ward. His voice echoed through the room, firm but gentle. Elias lifted his gaze. His eyes, though shadowed by exhaustion, were striking, a deep, storm-weathered blue that seemed to hold stories no one had bothered to ask about. Veronica, instead, offered a theatrical sigh. "Caprio, Mr. Ward, please state your name for the record." "Elias Ward, Your Honor." The veteran's voice was raspy, yet controlled, like someone accustomed to speaking only when necessary. Caprio nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Ward." Then he turned to Veronica. "Caprio, Ms. Hale, you're the complainant. Before we begin, I'd like everyone in this courtroom to remember this. Respect is expected here, regardless of appearance or circumstance." Veronica's eyebrows twitched. A brief flash of irritation crossed her face. Caprio noticed. The gallery noticed. Elias did not react. His expression remained calm, almost practiced. The judge continued, "We will proceed shortly. But first, Mr. Ward, do you need water?" A moment to settle in. Elias shook his head politely. "No thank you, Your Honor. I'm fine." That small act, the quiet refusal to demand anything, deepened the tension. The judge leaned back, studying the man. Something about him didn't fit the image of a typical defendant. Something unspoken. Something heavy. A bailiff stepped closer to the judge and whispered, "He came alone. No counsel. Said he didn't need one." Caprio raised an eyebrow. Veronica scoffed audibly. "Probably because he can't afford one," she said, pretending not to notice that half the courtroom heard her. Elias didn't look at her. He didn't even blink. He simply stared at the table, or through it, as if remembering a battlefield no one else could see. Caprio cleared his throat again. "Ms. Hale, we'll address this with professionalism." Veronica folded her arms, unapologetic. The old veteran lifted his head at last, slowly, and met the judge's eyes. An unspoken understanding passed between them. A quiet plea, or perhaps a warning. Before Caprio could speak further, a court officer hurried in from the hallway and approached the bench. He leaned close and whispered urgently into the judge's ear. Caprio's expression changed, not drastically, but enough for the gallery to straighten in their seats. Something had just shifted. Something no one expected. And as the judge looked back at Elias Ward, there was a new tension in his gaze, as if the man who walked in with nothing might not be who everyone thought he was. The air felt heavier the moment Judge Caprio leaned forward, elbows resting on the polished bench. A simple case, that's how the docket labeled it. A routine complaint. Nothing unusual. But nothing about the people before him felt routine. Caprio adjusted his glasses and addressed the courtroom. "Ms. Hale, we'll begin with your statement. Please describe what happened." Veronica stood with slow, deliberate elegance. Her heels clicked sharply against the floor as she approached the podium, each step meant to announce her presence. She lifted her chin, pushing a perfect strand of platinum hair behind her ear. "Veronica, Your Honor, 2 nights ago I found this man." She pointed at Elias without looking at him. "Leaning against my car." "My car, Your Honor." "A custom black Elara X7. He scratched the paint." Deep scratches. "Several of them." Gasps murmured through the gallery. Not because of the allegation, but because of the entitlement dripping from every syllable. Elias kept his eyes down. Not in shame, but in restraint. Caprio's gaze remained steady. "Did you witness him scratch the vehicle?" Veronica hesitated, for half a second, but quickly masked it with indignation. "Veronica, I saw him when I came out of the restaurant. He was right there. Right beside it. Who else could have done it? My car was perfect before." Caprio tapped his pen once. A small sound. But in the silent courtroom, it echoed like suspicion. "Caprio, Ms. Hale, please answer carefully. Did you see him physically cause the damage?" She inhaled sharply. Her nostrils flared. Her attorney shifted uncomfortably beside her. "Veronica, I didn't see him scratch it. But he was there. That should be enough." A wave of unease passed through the room. It moved like a cold draft. Even the bailiff paused. Caprio leaned back, crossing his arms. "Ms. Hale, presence does not equal guilt." Veronica bristled. "Your Honor, with all due respect, people like him." Caprio raised a hand sharply. The courtroom froze. His voice dropped into a stern, cutting tone. "Ms. Hale, choose your words." Her confidence cracked for the first time. Elias finally lifted his gaze, not to confront her, but simply to acknowledge the weight of the judge's defense. For a brief moment, his eyes met hers. Veronica flinched, as if the quiet strength in his stare unsettled her more than any accusation could. Caprio turned to Elias. "Mr. Ward, do you wish to respond?" Elias inhaled slowly, lifting his frail body to stand. His hands gripped the table edge for balance. "Elias, Your Honor, I didn't scratch her car. I was trying to." He stopped. A flicker, small but visible, crossed his face. Something held him back. Caprio noticed. Everyone noticed. "Caprio, you were trying to what, Mr. Ward?" Elias swallowed. His voice grew quieter. "It doesn't matter. I just didn't do what she's saying." A strange silence followed, the kind where the truth is louder than words. Veronica rolled her eyes dramatically. "Of course he denies it. What else would he say?" Her attorney tugged her sleeve subtly, a silent plea to stop talking. Caprio tapped his pen again, then stopped abruptly. "Court officer," he said, "bring me the incident report and any available surveillance footage." A sudden shift pierced the courtroom, something like panic. Not from Elias. From Veronica. Her jaw tightened. Her perfectly manicured fingers curled around the podium. Her breath hitched for a moment too long. Caprio noticed that, too. He wrote a quick note, then looked toward both parties. "Caprio, we will examine evidence before drawing conclusions. What appears simple often is not." As the judge spoke, the courtroom doors opened. A court officer entered holding a sealed envelope marked "Parking Lot Camera, Night of Incident." Veronica turned pale. Elias exhaled, barely, as though the weight of an unseen truth stirred. Caprio raised the envelope but didn't open it yet. Instead, he looked at Elias, then Veronica, then the gallery. A moment of charged anticipation filled the air. "This evidence," Caprio said slowly, "may change everything." The courtroom held its breath. The sealed envelope rested on Judge Caprio's bench like a ticking device, ready to detonate the moment he tore it open. The courtroom sat in tight silence, a silence thick enough to taste. Veronica Hale broke it. "This is ridiculous," she muttered, loud enough for half the gallery to hear. Her voice dripped like acid, melting whatever patience remained in the room. Caprio lifted his eyes, slow and firm. "Ms. Hale, everything said in this courtroom is on record. Choose your words carefully. But Veronica was too angry, too threatened, too deeply invested in the lies she had built around herself. She inhaled sharply and stepped forward again, ignoring her attorney's desperate tug at her sleeve. Veronica, Your Honor, this entire thing is a waste of time. This man. She gestured toward Elias with a flick of her hand, the way someone might shoo away a stray animal. Has probably caused trouble all over the city. Look at him. He's unpredictable. Probably delusional. People like him don't belong anywhere near decent society. A murmur of outrage rose from the gallery. Elias didn't move. He didn't blink. He simply stood there, absorbing every word like a weathered cliff against a violent wave. Caprio's jaw tightened, a rare shift in his normally calm demeanor. Caprio, Miss Hale, that is enough. But she wasn't done. The poison had been stirred, and now it spilled freely. Veronica, why are we even giving him a platform? My car probably costs more than everything he's ever owned. He should be grateful I didn't press harsher charges. Her attorney hissed, Veronica, stop talking. She snapped back, No. I won't. Someone has to say the truth. Caprio slammed his gavel once, not for order, but for warning. The sound cracked through the room. Caprio, Ms. Hale, your contempt will not be tolerated. Continue in this manner, and I will hold you in direct violation of courtroom decorum. Veronica froze, but her expression remained defiant, a spoiled fury simmering behind her eyes. Elias shifted slightly, his voice emerging like a quiet gust of wind. Elias, Your Honor, may I say something? Caprio nodded, relieved for a voice of sanity. Elias turned, not to the judge, but to Veronica. His posture was frail, but his presence felt unexpectedly solid. Elias, ma'am, I don't want your pity, and I don't need your approval. But you shouldn't talk about people you don't know. His words were calm, too calm, and that calmness unsettled Veronica more than any insult could have. Veronica scoffed, Oh, please. Spare me the wounded hero act. Elias exhaled slowly, as if holding back something heavier than words. Elias, I was there that night, yes. But you don't know what happened. You don't know why I was near your car. You don't know why I... He stopped. Again. That same flicker of hesitation. A crack in his composure. Something unspoken beneath the surface. Caprio leaned forward. Mr. Ward, if there is something you need to say, you may say it. The gallery leaned forward, mirroring him. Veronica folded her arms, rolling her eyes with theatrical impatience. Veronica, he's stalling. Obviously, he's guilty. Just open the footage so we can prove it. The judge shot her a sharp look. You do not run this courtroom. She bit her lip, finally sensing she had pushed too far. Caprio lifted the envelope again, slowly, deliberately, letting the suspense stretch until the tension felt like a physical grip around everyone's throat. But before he could open it, a loud voice erupted from the back of the courtroom. Your Honor, wait. All heads snapped toward the source. A uniformed man, a security supervisor from the parking lot, stood at the entrance, breathless, eyes wide. He held a USB drive in his shaking hand. I think you need to see this footage instead. The entire courtroom stiffened. Veronica turned white as paper. Elias lowered his head, as if he knew exactly what was coming, and dreaded its return. Judge Caprio gestured the officer forward, his expression darkening with anticipation. Something monumental was about to be revealed. The parking lot supervisor placed the USB drive on the judge's bench as if it were evidence from a crime scene. Judge Caprio nodded to him once, then set the drive beside the unopened envelope. The courtroom exhaled, but not with relief. More like preparation. Preparation for whatever truth was about to crawl out of the shadows. Caprio clasped his hands together. Mr. Ward, before we review either piece of footage, I want to hear from you directly. Elias slowly lifted his head. His frail shoulders straightened, as though an invisible weight had settled neatly across them, familiar but painful. Caprio's tone softened. You hesitated earlier. You seemed like you wanted to explain something important. The courtroom deserves to hear it. The gallery leaned forward collectively, drawn in by gravity they couldn't resist. Elias inhaled. A deep, shaky breath. The kind taken by men who have swallowed their truth for too long. Elias, Your Honor, I haven't spoken much about my life. Not in years. When you live outside, people don't ask. And after a while, you stop offering. His voice wasn't loud, yet it rolled through the courtroom with uncanny force, like a storm whispering across abandoned fields. Veronica scoffed quietly, but this time it sounded hollow. Elias continued, eyes fixed somewhere in the past. Elias, I served in the military. 40-something years ago. I was a young man then, with more strength than sense. I thought service would make me useful, make me worthy. Caprio leaned forward ever so slightly. A war veteran? A homeless elder? The gallery murmured. Elias's hands trembled, not from nerves, but from memories resurfacing after too many years buried. Elias, it wasn't the fighting that broke me. You expect fighting. You prepare for it. But no one prepares you for the silence that follows. The silence when the noise is gone but the memories stay loud. A sharp stillness filled the courtroom. Even the air felt respectful. Elias, when I came back home, I wasn't the same. Lost people, lost myself. Lost the version of me that knew how to live in normal places. Over time, I ended up on the streets. Not because I wanted to, but because I didn't know how to be anywhere else. His voice cracked, the smallest fracture, then steadied again. Veronica crossed her arms, uncomfortable for the first time, eyes flicking away like she was trying not to listen. Caprio cleared his throat, his voice gentler than before. Mr. Ward, thank you for saying that. But about the night in question, why were you near Ms. Hale's vehicle? Elias's expression shifted. A shadow crossed his features, a shadow that did not belong to age, but to memory. Elias, because I recognized her car. A ripple of confusion swept through the room. Caprio blinked. You recognized it? Elias nodded. Elias, not the model. Not the color. The plate. Veronica stiffened. Her attorney's eyes widened, whispering, Wait, how would he? Caprio raised a hand for silence. Mr. Ward, explain. Elias's voice grew heavier. Elias, years ago, a car with that same plate number was involved in an accident. I was there. I witnessed it. And I've never forgotten those numbers. Some things stay with you. A cold breeze seemed to pass through the courtroom. Veronica's face drained of color. Veronica, that's impossible. You're making that up. But her voice cracked on the last word. Caprio's gaze sharpened. Mr. Ward, are you saying Ms. Hale's car was involved in a previous incident? Elias hesitated. His jaw clenched. His next sentence felt like a trigger being pulled. Elias, I'm saying I saw that car the night a man died. Silence exploded through the room, loud, suffocating, electric. People stared at Veronica, then at Elias, then at Caprio. Veronica's breath hitched. Her hand trembled against the podium. Caprio slowly looked toward the USB drive, then back at Elias. Mr. Ward, what exactly did you witness? Elias lowered his gaze. Something I've been afraid to speak about for 40 years. The courtroom froze. A new truth, darker, sharper, hovered just at the edge of revelation. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, a soft static that blended with the restless shuffling of the crowded courtroom. Elias sat rigid, fingers clasped so tightly that his knuckles blanched. He tried to slow his breathing, but the prosecutor's footsteps, slow, deliberate, predatory, echoed like a countdown across the polished floor. Prosecutor Rourke stopped just a few feet from the witness stand. His eyes gleamed, sharp as a hunter's blade, and a faint smile teased the corner of his mouth. He smelled weakness, he smelled blood. Mr. Elias, Rourke began, voice dripping with calculated patience, you've presented yourself today as a man caught in unfortunate circumstances. A victim of misunderstanding, is that right? Elias swallowed. I said I didn't intend for any of it to happen. Rourke nodded, pacing before the judge's bench. Every few steps, he turned abruptly, like a wolf circling prey, to fire another question. But intention is a slippery thing, isn't it? He raised a brow. You intended to be at the warehouse that night? It wasn't like that, Elias said, voice trembling despite his best effort. Judge Marlowe leaned forward, adjusting his glasses. Mr. Elias, speak clearly. This is your testimony. Around them, whispers coiled through the gallery. A woman in the second row pressed her fingertips to her lips, eyes widening each time Rourke shifted direction. A man near the door shook his head slowly, muttering under his breath. The tension felt alive, breathing, expanding, swelling against the wooden walls. Rourke struck again. Let me rephrase. Did someone force you to go inside the building? Elias hesitated. That split-second pause was all the prosecutor needed. Aha! Rourke's smile widened. Ladies and gentlemen, note his silence. A man who claims innocence doesn't choke on simple questions. That's enough, Elias snapped. Too loud, too fast. Marlowe's gavel struck. Control yourself, Mr. Elias. The defendant lowered his head, jaw clenched. His heartbeat thudded in his ears. He felt eyes watching him from every direction, judging, dismissing, condemning. Rourke approached the stand so closely Elias could smell his cologne, cold, metallic, threatening. You were seen entering the warehouse. You stayed for 14 minutes. And you admitted you knew the victim. I knew him, yes, but that doesn't mean... Doesn't mean what? Rourke cut in smoothly. Doesn't mean you were angry. Doesn't mean you had a motive. Elias stiffened. I didn't kill him. Rourke stepped back theatrically, arms spread. I never said the word kill. Fascinating that you did. A ripple of shock tore through the courtroom. Elias had walked straight into the trap. Rourke turned to Judge Marlowe, respectful but triumphant. Your Honor, with your permission, I'd like to introduce a new piece of evidence. Marlowe's brows drew down. New evidence? At this stage? It is directly relevant to the defendant's credibility, Rourke replied, sliding a folder onto the clerk's desk. And it concerns the victim. Elias felt a cold weight settle into his chest. What evidence? His voice was barely more than a whisper. Rourke didn't answer. Not immediately. The prosecutor let the silence stretch, thick and unbearable, until the gallery leaned forward in collective breath. Judge Marlowe motioned. Proceed. Rourke flipped open the folder, slowly, almost ceremonially, and pulled out a glossy photograph. He held it between two fingers like a revelation. The courtroom went dead still. This, Rourke said, turning the photo so only Elias could see it, was taken less than an hour before the incident. Elias's eyes widened, his breath caught, his entire body froze. It couldn't be. But it was. The person in the photograph wasn't the victim. It was Elias, standing beside someone who shouldn't exist. Rourke's voice cut the silence like a blade. Mr. Elias, will you explain why you were seen with the victim's brother the night he disappeared? The gallery exploded with gasps. Elias said nothing, because he couldn't. Because the truth, the real truth, was worse than the accusation. The projector hummed to life with a low electric growl, casting its pale light across the darkened courtroom. Dust drifted lazily through the beam, shimmering like suspended ash. Every pair of eyes locked onto the blank screen. Elias sat rigid, shoulders tight, fighting the instinct to bolt from the room. Prosecutor Rourke stood near the evidence table, remote in hand, wearing the smug poise of a man who believed victory was seconds away. Your Honor, he announced, this security footage, recently recovered from a nearby convenience store, will provide crucial clarity regarding the defendant's whereabouts and intentions on the night in question. Judge Marlowe eyed him cautiously. And you're certain this is permissible at this stage? Rourke nodded. It directly speaks to the defendant's credibility. Marlowe sighed. Proceed. The screen flickered. A grainy timestamp appeared in the corner, 10:42 p.m., the night of the incident. Elias felt his pulse thud painfully in his neck. The footage began with a static view of a dimly lit alley. Trash bins, cracked pavement, flickering streetlights. Nothing unusual. But the atmosphere inside the courtroom grew heavier, anticipation thickened like fog. Rourke clicked forward. The shadow of a figure appeared on screen. Then a second. Rourke spoke smoothly, savoring each word. "Mr. Elias, please pay close attention." Elias exhaled shakily. I've never seen this footage." "You're about to." A figure stepped under the streetlight. The resolution was rough, but the outline was unmistakable. Elias. Sitting at the defense table, Elias flinched as if struck. A murmur rippled through the gallery. Marlowe tapped his gavel. "Order. Continue." On screen, Elias looked around nervously before checking his phone. Then, from the darkness, another person appeared, hood pulled low, face mostly obscured. Rourke paused the footage. "Mr. Elias, do you recognize this person?" "No," Elias whispered. Rourke raised a brow. "No hesitation this time?" "I don't know who that is." Rourke shrugged. "Let's continue." The video resumed. The hooded figure moved closer to Elias on screen, leaning in as if whispering something. Elias, the Elias on screen, jerked slightly, looked around, and then reached into his jacket pocket. The real Elias stiffened in his chair. "This isn't what it looks like." Rourke smiled thinly. "Isn't it?" The gallery leaned forward as the video zoomed in. Elias on screen pulled out a small object. The camera caught only its silhouette, but the shape, rectangular, metallic, suggested more than anyone wanted to admit. Marlowe frowned. "What is that?" Rourke paused dramatically. "A question for the defendant, I believe." All eyes shot to Elias. He shook his head, voice cracking. I don't remember meeting anyone that night. I left the warehouse alone." Rourke's tone hardened. "Yet here you are on video, meeting a mysterious individual minutes after you claim to have gone straight home." The whispers returned, sharp, accusatory. Rourke pressed play. The hooded figure handed something to Elias. A small bag. Elias on screen tucked it into his pocket before the two parted ways, disappearing in opposite directions. The footage ended. Silence swallowed the room. Rourke let it sit, savoring the weight of it. "Mr. Elias, would you like to explain to the court what was exchanged between you and the unknown individual?" "I don't know," Elias shouted, frustration cracking through fear. "I swear I don't know." Marlowe's gavel slammed. "Mr. Elias, control yourself." Elias gripped the edge of the table, knuckles trembling. His breathing came fast and shallow, panic rising like a tide. Rourke lifted another folder. The court should also know that the store's exterior camera captured an additional angle. Elias froze. "Another angle?" Marlowe asked. "Yes, Your Honor. One that clearly reveals the identity of the hooded figure." The room erupted in gasps. Rourke stepped toward the projector, sliding in a second USB drive with deliberate slowness. Elias felt his throat close. No, it couldn't be." Rourke clicked play. The figure stepped into view. The hood slipped. The face was unmistakable. Someone the court, and Elias, believed to be dead. Elias shot out of his seat, eyes wide. The courtroom exploded into chaos, and the screen faded to black. 4 years, Veronica Hart had built her identity on precision, every gesture calculated, every word sharpened, every public appearance meticulously rehearsed. But now, sitting at the defendant's table as the courtroom's fluorescent lights unforgivingly exposed every crack in her poise, that empire of control trembled. She lifted her chin as the murmurs continued. People whispered behind their hands, eyes darting between her and Elias as though comparing two different worlds collapsing at once. Judge Marlowe tapped his pen, eyes narrowing. "Ms. Hart," he said, voice steady but stern, "you appear unsettled. Care to explain why this footage has caused such a reaction?" Her breath caught. "I'm not unsettled," she said, though her voice betrayed her, thin, wavering. "I just find the theatrics unnecessary." A small ripple of disbelief passed through the gallery. Prosecutor Rourke stepped forward, savoring the shift in power. "Your Honor, the defendant's sudden discomfort is interesting, especially considering she has maintained throughout this trial that she has nothing to hide." Veronica's jaw tightened. "I don't." "Then perhaps," Rourke replied, You can explain the call logs we recovered that place you in contact with the same unknown number that appeared in Elias's phone records the night of the exchange? Silence fell so heavy it felt like pressure on the chest. Veronica didn't breathe for several seconds. Judge Marlowe leaned forward. Ms. Hart. Her eyes flickered, once, rapidly, like someone calculating the fastest escape route. I have many contacts, she said coolly. I can't be expected to recognize every number I've ever interacted with. Rourke clicked his tongue. Of course not. But the court might find it hard to believe that you exchanged, he checked his notes, 15 messages with that number over the span of 2 hours. The gallery erupted. Order! Marlowe barked. Veronica's pulse hammered. She clasped her hands together to hide the tremble in her fingers. Her empire of composure was collapsing like a sandcastle in the tide. Narration filled the cracks between her breaths. For the first time since walking into the courtroom, Veronica felt watched, not with admiration or envy, but with suspicion, hunger, a morbid fascination at witnessing a fall from grace. Every doubt she had buried, every mistake she had smoothed over, surged up like a flood. Rourke approached the bench, lowering his voice just enough to seem intimate, dangerous. Ms. Hart, you do realize what this number is linked to, don't you? Veronica swallowed. Hart. No. Rourke smiled. Interesting, because the owner of that number appears in the new footage. He gestured to the blank projector screen. And based on your reaction earlier, I'd say you recognized him. Her mask shattered, only for a second, but long enough. Judge Marlowe saw it. Elias saw it. The gallery devoured it. Rourke pressed. Would you like to explain your relationship with this individual? I don't have a relationship with him. Strange. Rourke turned back to the court. Because the logs suggest ongoing communication, and the footage suggests coordination. Veronica shot to her feet. You're twisting everything. I'm being targeted because I'm successful, because I don't crumble like the rest of you. Marlowe's gavel thundered. Ms. Hart, sit down. No. Her breath came in jagged bursts. Mascara smudged beneath her lower lashes. She sat slowly, almost mechanically, as though her limbs no longer obeyed her. The room felt colder. Rourke returned to his table, satisfied. Your Honor, the prosecution would like to submit a new document obtained this morning. A new document? Marlowe asked. Yes. It contains financial transfers involving Ms. Hart and the same unidentified individual from the footage. Veronica's blood ran ice-cold. Financial transfers? No. No, that couldn't be brought up. Not now. Not here. Rourke opened the envelope. Judge Marlowe adjusted his glasses. The gallery leaned forward. Veronica's hand shook beneath the table. Rourke lifted a single printed page. But before he could speak, the courtroom doors burst open. A bailiff rushed inside, pale-faced, urgency bleeding from his expression. Your Honor, he said, voice cracking, you need to hear this immediately. It's about the man in the footage. Everyone turned. The room held its breath. Veronica's fingers dug into the table edge. The bailiff swallowed hard. He's here. The courtroom doors slammed shut behind the bailiff, but the echo hung in the air like a ghost refusing to leave. Judge Marlowe's eyes narrowed. Searching the room for an explanation the bailiff was struggling to form. Who is here? Marlowe demanded. The bailiff inhaled shakily. The man from the footage, Your Honor. He's requesting to testify. A storm of whispers erupted in the gallery. Elias collapsed back into his chair, his breath knocked out of him. Veronica, however, went rigid, stone-still, unblinking. Not even fear moved across her face. It was something deeper. Recognition. Dread. The doors opened again. A man stepped inside. Older, weathered, hair grayed and face marked with the lines of a life lived in the shadows. His posture was stiff, as though the world had forgotten him, and suddenly remembered. Elias's voice cracked. That's impossible. You're dead. The man's eyes flickered toward him, grief and apology tangled in their depths. No, Elias. I'm not. Judge Marlowe lifted a hand. Identify yourself. The man removed a folded, worn ID card. My name is Henry Calloway. Gasps rippled through the room. Henry Calloway. Missing since 1985. A name buried in old police reports and dusty archives. A case abandoned after no body was found. A ghost. Veronica squeezed her eyes shut. Elias stared, jaw slack. You were my father's partner. He said you died in the fire. I didn't die, Henry whispered, voice gravelly. I ran. The courtroom erupted. Marlowe slammed his gavel. Everyone sit down. Mr. Calloway, why are you coming forward now? Henry's shoulders trembled. Because what's happening here is because of me. Because of what happened 40 years ago. Veronica's voice, low and brittle, finally cracked through the tension. You should have stayed dead. Every head snapped toward her. Henry met her gaze, remorse thick in his expression. You were just a child. I never meant to destroy your family. The gallery froze. A child. Judge Marlowe leaned in. Ms. Hart, how do you know this man? Veronica clenched her jaw, but her voice betrayed her facade. He was my mother's informant. Henry shook his head. No, Veronica. I was more than that. Veronica shot up from her seat. Don't you dare. Rourke raised a hand. Your Honor, I request that Mr. Calloway be sworn in immediately. Marlowe nodded. Bring him forward. As the bailiff escorted Henry to the stand, the air grew heavier, suffocating, as if the walls themselves were bracing for the truth. Henry placed a trembling hand on the Bible. I swear to tell the truth. You may proceed, Marlowe said. Henry exhaled, the weight of 40 years pressing down on him. In 1985, I worked undercover with Veronica's mother. She was investigating a corruption ring tied to high-profile financial crimes. I was her contact, her ally, and her friend. Veronica's face twisted, not in surprise, but in old bitterness. You ruined everything. Henry shook his head. It wasn't me. It was your father. A collective gasp filled the room. He discovered the operation, Henry continued, voice low, and he wanted it buried. Permanently. Elias leaned forward, breath shallow. What does this have to do with me? Henry looked at him with devastating sadness. Your father and Veronica's father were involved in the same operation. When the truth came close to coming out, they framed me, staged my death, and destroyed every record connecting them. Elias staggered back in his seat. Veronica blinked rapidly, her control fracturing. No, you're lying. My father would never. Henry's voice rose. Veronica, he did. And the fallout of that night shaped both your lives. Your family's wealth. Your rise. Elias's fall. Every loss. Every lie. Judge Marlowe stared at Henry. Why come forward now? Henry's voice barely held. Because that man in the footage, the one meeting Elias, wasn't setting him up. He swallowed. He was delivering the last piece of evidence that proves the truth. Veronica's hand shook uncontrollably. Elias whispered, What evidence? Henry's eyes drifted slowly toward Veronica. The evidence, he said softly, is about her. The room froze. Henry inhaled, steadying himself. Veronica Hart isn't who she says she is. The courtroom exploded. And the chapter ends. For a moment, the courtroom forgot to breathe. Henry's words, Veronica Hart isn't who she says she is, hung in the air like a blade dangling by a thread. And when the thread snapped, the room erupted. People stood, chairs scraped, voices collided into a storm of disbelief. The gallery fractured into pockets of arguments, gasps, and shouted accusations. A woman fainted. Cameras clicked like locusts devouring a field. Judge Marlowe slammed his gavel so hard the oak block cracked beneath it. Order! Sit down! Now! Even his roar couldn't drown the chaos. Veronica stood trembling at the center of it. Not with fear. No, this was something older, darker. Rage. Betrayal. The terror of a carefully sculpted life collapsing in front of 100 hungry eyes. She hissed through clenched teeth. You think you can walk back after 40 years and destroy me? You're a corpse pretending to be a man. Henry didn't flinch. His voice was steady, almost mournful. "Veronica, you destroyed yourself." Her breath faltered. She looked away, jaw clenched, as if refusing to let him see the truth crack her armor. Elias pressed a hand to his forehead. "None of this makes sense. Why would any of this?" Rourke cut him off, stepping forward with predatory sharpness. "Your Honor, the prosecution insists that Mr. Calloway continue. The defendant's identity is now a matter of legal relevance." Marlowe leaned forward, knuckles white on the bench. "Mr. Calloway, explain yourself clearly." Henry exhaled slowly. "Veronica Hart was never meant to inherit her father's empire," he began. "She wasn't even born with that name." All eyes snapped to her. Veronica's voice shook. "Stop. Your father," Henry continued, "took you in illegally, hid your origins, hid everything, because exposing the truth would have destroyed his reputation." Veronica slammed a hand on the table. "I said stop." The courtroom jolted. But Henry continued anyway. "You weren't the daughter of the man who raised you. You were the daughter of someone else. Someone dangerous." The gallery inhaled as one. Elias leaned forward. Who was she?" Veronica's hands curled into fists so tight her nails cut skin. Henry looked directly at Judge Marlowe. "Her biological father was tied to the corruption ring your court tried to dismantle in 1985. Marlowe blinked. "You're saying—" "Yes," Henry whispered. "Her true father was the architect of the entire operation." Veronica's face drained of color. Her knees buckled, and she clutched the table to stay upright. The cracks in her composure were no longer metaphorical. She was shattering. A murmur rippled through the courtroom like thunder rolling across storm clouds. Rourke lifted a stack of papers. "We will be subpoenaing DNA records." "You'll do no such thing." Veronica spat. Marlowe slammed his gavel again. "Ms. Hart, one more outburst and you will be held in contempt." Silence carved itself into the room like stone. Veronica's breathing grew labored, chest tightening as though the truth itself were suffocating her. Henry lowered his gaze. "I tried to protect you. Your mother tried too. But you walked into the same darkness we fought to escape." Veronica laughed, a brittle, broken sound. "You don't know anything about me." Henry met her eyes. "I know enough. I know why you wanted Elias out of the way." Elias jerked up. What does this have to do with me?" Henry hesitated. Marlowe leaned forward, voice cautious. "Mr. Calloway, answer the question." Henry's shoulders sank. "Because Elias carries something his father left behind. A truth. A key. Something people would kill to bury." The room froze. Elias's pulse raced. "What truth?" Veronica finally looked at him, really looked at him, her eyes burning with a mixture of hatred and fear. Henry spoke softly, like someone lifting the lid off a coffin. "Elias, your father knew who Veronica truly was. And he hid something before he died. Something that could expose everything." Elias shook his head. "What did he hide?" Henry swallowed hard. "A recording." Dead silence. Marlowe's voice barely rose above a whisper. "Where is it?" Henry answered without blinking. "In this courthouse." The lights flickered. A scream echoed from the hallway. And before anyone could react, the entire building went dark. Darkness gripped the courtroom like a fist. For several seconds, chaos pulsed through the shadows, shuffling feet, gasps, someone crying softly, a chair falling over. Then, a single emergency light flickered to life above the bench, casting Judge Caprio in a stark, haloed glow. His silhouette was still, unmoving, like a judge carved from stone. "Everyone remain calm," he commanded, his voice cutting through panic with clean authority. And just like that, the room steadied. The power surged back on in patches, one overhead light, then another, buzzing like restless insects. The courtroom's faces re-emerged, Veronica pale as marble, Elias wide-eyed, Henry bracing himself like a soldier awaiting fire. Judge Caprio stood slowly. The iconic presence, the steady warmth, the quiet but undeniable force of justice, settled over the courtroom like a returning heartbeat. "We will restore order," he declared. "We will find the truth. And no intimidation, no manipulation, no hidden past," his gaze slid sharply to Veronica, "will derail this court." Veronica's lips curled. "Save your sermons for people who care." Caprio didn't raise his voice, but the entire gallery stilled. "Ms. Hart," he said, "you will remain silent unless you are spoken to. I will not tolerate disrespect, not toward this court, nor toward the truth." Her throat tightened. Henry spoke up softly, "Judge Caprio, someone doesn't want this evidence found." Elias swallowed hard. "The recording. You said it's in the courthouse." Caprio's eyes narrowed. "Explain that." "Now." Henry took a breath, hands trembling on the witness stand. Before Elias's father died, he left a cassette tape in the hands of someone he trusted. Someone who worked inside this building. Rourke leaned forward. "Who?" Henry opened his mouth, but Veronica's voice sliced through the room like a blade. "Don't say another word." Caprio struck his gavel sharply. "Ms. Hart." But she wasn't looking at the judge. Her eyes were locked on Henry, venomous, desperate. "You think exposing this will save you?" she snarled. "You're already dead. Again." Henry stared at her with heartbreaking calm. "Veronica, the truth is the only thing that might save any of us." The gallery reacted with a wave of uneasy murmurs. Caprio exhaled slowly. "This court will see the truth, whether it's buried in 40 years of lies or hidden 3 floors beneath us." He turned to Henry. "Tell us who has the recording." Henry hesitated. Caprio stepped closer, his voice lower, deeper. "Mr. Calloway, I cannot administer justice blindfolded. I need the truth." A long, agonizing beat passed. Henry whispered, "The recording was given to the court archivist." Gasps erupted again. Rourke frowned. "Judge, that archivist died last month." Caprio paused. Henry nodded. He knew something might happen to him, so he hid it somewhere only someone desperate for answers would look. Elias's breath quickened. "Where?" Henry's eyes shifted to him. "Your father mentioned you once," he said softly. "Said you would find what others would overlook." Caprio's brow tightened. "Are you saying the recording was left somewhere Elias could access?" Henry nodded slowly. "Yes. In the one place no one thinks to search." Veronica's breathing turned erratic. "Don't you dare!" Caprio silenced her with a raised hand. "Mr. Calloway," he said, voice steady as a steel beam, "where is the recording?" Henry opened his mouth. But before he could speak, a sharp metallic clatter echoed through the hall outside the courtroom. Everyone froze. Another sound followed, the unmistakable snap of a latch being broken. Caprio's eyes narrowed. The bailiff rushed to the door, peered out. Then turned back, face drained. "Judge, someone just forced entry into the court archives." Caprio's expression darkened, the calm warmth replaced with icy, iron resolve. "Seal the building," he ordered. "No one leaves. Not until we find out who is trying to bury this evidence." Veronica inhaled sharply, panic finally cracking through her mask. Elias whispered, "Judge, someone's going after the recording." Caprio lifted his gavel slowly. "Not if justice gets there first." He struck the block. And somewhere deep inside the courthouse, a scream cut through the stillness. The courtroom had never been this quiet. Not when Veronica first walked in with her designer arrogance, not when Elias broke beneath the weight of his memories, and not even when the footage exposed the truth like a blade slicing through silk. This silence was different, anticipatory, electric, almost sacred. Judge Caprio sat motionless, fingertips touching, eyes closed as if listening to some echo only he could hear. When he finally opened them, the room straightened itself like a soldier under inspection. "Both sides will approach," he said, voice steady but carved from something heavy. The prosecutor moved first, confidence sharp in every step. "Your Honor," she began, "the evidence is overwhelming." Veronica Stone orchestrated financial manipulation, intimidation of vulnerable tenants, and attempted to falsify court documents. This wasn't a crime of desperation. It was a crime of empire. Veronica's lawyer interrupted. Objection to the characterization. Sustained, Caprio murmured, though his expression remained unchanged. The prosecutor didn't miss a beat. We request the maximum sentence allowable under state law. Veronica lifted her chin, her voice slicing through the tension. This is political theater. I'm being punished because I'm successful. Because I refuse to bow to your narrative of the powerful villain. Murmurs fluttered through the audience. Caprio turned to her directly. Ms. Stone, you will have your moment. Allow counsel to continue. The prosecutor nodded gratefully. Your Honor, Elias Morgan's testimony reveals a pattern, 40 years of calculated cruelty. Today, this court has the opportunity to set a precedent. To tell every victim silenced by money and intimidation that justice can still reach them. Elias, seated in the front row, stared at the floor. His hands trembled, but not with fear, relief, exhaustion, maybe both. Now the defense rose. Veronica's attorney cleared his throat, trying to steady a voice clearly aware of the futility he faced. Judge Caprio, my client stands before you not as a symbol, but as a person. Yes, she made mistakes, serious ones. But she has no criminal history, she has contributed significantly to her community, and she has dependents who rely on her. Mercy is not weakness, Your Honor. It is fairness. Veronica didn't look at him. Her eyes burned holes into Caprio instead. Miss Stone, Caprio finally said, you may speak. She stood slowly, smoothing her expensive suit as if that alone could shield her. I built everything I have, she said. Every property. Every contract. Every success. And now? Now everyone wants to tear it down because one man, she gestured sharply toward Elias, couldn't let go of the past. I am not the monster they say. I am a survivor. And I will not apologize for being stronger than the people who resent me. Gasps echoed. Even her lawyer closed his eyes briefly, mortified. Caprio leaned forward. Strength is not measured by how many people you can crush beneath your assent. For the first time, Veronica faltered. The judge lifted the sentencing file. The room inhaled. In consideration of the evidence, testimony, and the severity of the actions taken by Veronica Stone, he paused, long enough for hearts to pound painfully. This court hereby sentences. The doors to the courtroom burst open. Everyone turned. A uniformed officer rushed in, pale, sweating. Your Honor, there's been a development. A major one. Concerning the case. Caprio lowered the folder. Explain. The officer hesitated, glancing at Veronica, then Elias, then the prosecutor. A new witness just arrived. Someone who claims to have information. That changes everything. Veronica's face drained of color. Caprio's jaw tightened. Bring them in. The officer swallowed. Sir, the witness insists on speaking to you privately. They say the truth they're carrying is dangerous. The judge stood. Slowly, gravely. Court will recess, he announced. Effective immediately. The gavel struck. And the noise that followed wasn't applause or panic. It was silence. The kind of silence that comes right before the world breaks. The courtroom buzzed with whispers the moment Judge Caprio stepped through the side door, heading to meet the anonymous witness. The gavel had fallen, but instead of dispersing, the audience lingered like shadows glued to the wooden benches. Fear, curiosity, and a faint tremor of excitement twisted together in the air. Elias Morgan sat alone in the front row, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles looked carved from chalk. For a man who had survived war, loss, and 4 decades of guilt, he suddenly appeared fragile, like a soldier stripped of armor. Across the room, Veronica Stone watched him. Not with hatred, not with triumph, something colder, calculating. Her fingers tapped against the polished table in a slow, deliberate rhythm, as though she were counting her enemies one by one. Her lawyer leaned in. You need to stay composed. Any panic now? I'm not panicking, she hissed. I'm evaluating. The prosecutor, meanwhile, stood near the bench, arms crossed. Her eyes flicked between the side door Caprio had vanished through and Elias, as if the truth sat somewhere between them. Minutes passed, heavy and slow. Finally, Elias rose from his seat. The prosecutor noticed immediately. "Mr. Morgan, you all right?" He gave her a small nod, but his expression was distant. "I just need air." "You shouldn't leave," she warned. "Not until Caprio returns with whatever that witness has brought." Elias's gaze drifted toward the tall courtroom windows, where thin streams of winter light painted faint silver bars across the floor. "Some truths take more than one lifetime to carry," he murmured. The prosecutor frowned. "Elias, what does that mean?" But he didn't answer. He stepped away from the row, his limp more pronounced than usual, shoulders weighed down by something larger than fatigue. The audience murmured as he passed, recognizing the man who had become the heart of the case. Veronica watched him with narrowed eyes. "He knows something," she muttered. Her lawyer sighed. "Everyone knows something at this point." "I'm not talking about the case," Veronica snapped. "I'm talking about the witness." The defense attorney turned to her, startled. "What witness?" But Veronica had already looked away. Elias reached the exit doors. They loomed before him, tall and wooden, carved with symbols of justice that felt too idealistic for the real world he'd lived in. He placed a hand on the brass handle, but stopped when he heard footsteps behind him. The prosecutor had followed. "Elias," she whispered, "don't leave. Not yet. Caprio might need you." Elias turned slightly, enough for her to see the sheen in his eyes. "I told my story," he said softly. "More than I ever intended. But the truth isn't finished with me. Not yet." "Then stay and finish it." He hesitated. "You don't understand. When ghosts start talking, they don't stop. And the witness, whoever they are, they're bringing ghosts of their own." The prosecutor's brow furrowed. "Are you saying you know them?" But she never got her answer, because the side door swung open. Every head in the courtroom snapped toward it. Judge Caprio emerged, face pale, jaw tight. Behind him, just visible through the partially open door, stood a silhouette. Small, frail, and trembling. Caprio raised a hand. "Court remains in recess. No one leaves." But Elias had already pushed the door open. Caprio's voice sharpened. "Mr. Morgan, stop." Elias paused at the threshold, sunlight streaking across his worn features. His eyes met the judge's with a look of apology and resolve. "I can't," he said. "Not this time." The judge's expression darkened, fear, not authority, flickering behind his eyes. The silhouette behind the door spoke, voice quivering. "Elias, please don't go." A woman's voice. Soft. Familiar. Everyone froze. Veronica's face drained of color. Caprio clenched his fists. The prosecutor whispered, "Dear God, who is she?" Elias closed his eyes as though bracing for impact. And then, without another word, he stepped through the exit, leaving the courtroom, the case, and every unanswered question collapsing behind him like a building losing its foundation. The doors shut. The silence that followed wasn't just heavy. It was devastating.